Good afternoon, everybody. It's very nice to see so many people that I know in the audience and so many wonderful, warm faces on this afternoon. I'd like to express my appreciation to Gigi and to Michael and everyone at Public Knowledge for putting together this very thoughtful conference, and to all of you for taking time to be here today. I also want to recognize Public Knowledge for its recent white paper, in which they reflected on the Copyright Office and offered the next Register of Copyrights some suggestions for navigating the years ahead. In my remarks today, I'd like to highlight some of the achievements of the office over time, and then outline some of the ways in which I would like to see it move forward, drawing on rich partnerships with the public, copyright owners, and users of copyrighted materials. I very much look forward to hearing your thoughts and suggestions throughout this afternoon, a sentiment that I know I share with my colleagues who are here today from the office and from the Library of Congress. And I won't introduce you, but if you work at the Library of Congress or the Copyright Office, could you raise your hand for just a moment? There you go.
Wow. You listened to the boss, didn't you?
So as I was thinking about this conference, I was motivated by how much the copyright community has changed and evolved in the 20 years since I've graduated from law school. And as Public Knowledge put it, copyright policy making is no longer a sleepy backwater followed by a handful of copyright holders and their lawyers. Well, I think this is true. The tent is global and it's enormously diverse. And it includes a mix of new and traditional stakeholders. Obviously individual authors, composers, photographers, artists, architects, documentary filmmakers, book publishers, music publishers, software publishers, motion picture companies, recording companies, museums, archives, libraries, schools, teenagers, technology companies, technology artists, search engines, consumers, and other parts of the government. Americans, though, are good at conversations, and in my view, we can't have enough of these about copyright. As a copyright lawyer, and also speaking as a civil servant, I think discussions that draw on diverse and sometimes competing professional fields like law and technology or law and economics are especially useful. In general, copyright lawyers are comfortable talking with other copyright lawyers because we read the same cases in law school. We had the same awakening that led us to abandon corporate tax and run screaming from mergers and acquisitions. And we endured the same friendly torture from patent lawyers who think that copyright is easy and that they're smarter than we are. Most of the time, though, we pinch ourselves for the good fortune of practicing in a field that respects creative authorship and culture, things that we and all of you find meaningful in our lives. Of course, there are some detractors. In this digital world where we all enjoy so much progress and wonder in our professional and personal lives, some people would frame copyright law and technology as two forces that are incapable of coexisting. I do not believe that is the case. Copyright law is a law of innovation. In the United States, it has been dancing with technology since the first Copyright Act of 1790, each informing the other along the way. Last week, I met with some of the registration specialists who work in our performing arts division. And one young man, who is also a musician, described the challenges of the digital age in this way. He said, "Even when the sheer number of claims threatens to crush my soul, I think about creativity and draw inspiration from the purpose of copyright law and the mission of the Copyright Office." So we have a great opportunity today to talk with each other about the future of the office and all of the ways in which it can be better. But before we do that, I would like to spend some time considering the past. The Copyright Office has been part of the library since 1870, when Congress centralized copyright functions, including copyright deposits, at the request of Ainsworth Spofford. Spofford was the 6th librarian of Congress. He was appointed by President Lincoln in the midst of the Civil War, and he is known for being a visionary. He sorely wanted the Library of Congress to be a great national collection in the model of the great European libraries. The Library of Congress helped the development of the Copyright Office and the copyright law, by ensuring through the law of 1870 that 2 copies of every book, pamphlet, map, print, photograph, and piece of music registered for copyright be deposited in the library, a requirement that certainly would have met with the approval of Jefferson. A little later, the International Copyright Law of 1891, which gave protection to works of foreign origin under certain conditions of reciprocal protection, added luster to the library's collections by bringing deposits of foreign works into the library for the first time. And for those historians in the audience, if you're interested in this period of the library's history, I would commend you to read A Brief History of the Library of Congress by John Cole, who runs the Library's Center for the Book. Now, in reading about Mr. Spofford, it occurred to me that he was kind of the Google of his day. At the time of his appointment, there was not yet a Library of Congress campus, though he and many others were campaigning for the Jefferson Building, which opened later in 1897. The library's acquisitions, including all of the copyright deposits, were piled up in the Capitol, often in the halls, sometimes in the basement, but certainly in chaos. According to a New York Times editorial that I was reading from the turn of the century, Mr. Spofford was a sort of human search engine. When people would come in off the streets to request a book, he would inform them of its location from sheer memory. So I imagine him with his eyes closed, saying, down the hall, 3rd pile on the right. And there are days, honestly, when I think that that system may work better than the government computers that we have. But today, the copyright registration system brings in hundreds of thousands of books, films, sound recordings, and other creative works of authorship for the library's national collection. Last year, the office transferred 814,243 copies of works at a value of approximately $33 million. Now, in the years between 1870 and 2011, the Copyright Office has grown tremendously. Today, we have a staff of almost 500 people, and we have a law that protects not only the reproduction and distribution of books, maps, and charts, but the public performance of movies and the digital transmission of some sound recordings, for example. Very recently, the Copyright Office, under former Registrar Mary Beth Peters, converted the registration system from paper to electronic, as many of you know. The system allows claimants to file registration applications online and in many cases to upload a digital copy of the work to fulfill the deposit requirement. Since electronic filings were made available in July of 2008, they have displaced paper claims. To date, echo claims constitute more than 80% of all the claims we receive. The office typically handles more than 500,000 copyright claims a year, representing over 1 million works. Last year, the office received over 522,000 new claims, but closed over 682,000 claims, of which it registered more than 636 claims. It also closed, so in other words, it closed 160,000 more than it received, eating into the backlog, rejecting about 7% of the applications. The office also answers hundreds of thousands of inquiries from the public every year and serves a substantial number of visitors to the Public Information Office and the Copyright Public Records Reading Room. Now, as you know, in building the electronic system, the office experienced a backlog that was not unexpected because the major work process changes, including temporary staff relocation, system testing, and servicing, were widespread and required workforce training. The backlog peaked in 2009, but with support from the library, the office has reduced that backlog by hundreds of thousands of claims to around 180,000 claims that are on hand as of this writing. At the same time, processing new claims at over 10,000 per week. I mention these because I think they are an achievement that speaks to the dedication of our employees. One issue that we will continue to explore going forward is what might constitute a reasonable number of claims on hand for purposes of assessing operational success. Because the electronic filing system allows for hybrid submissions, those are application and fee are submitted electronically, but the deposit is mailed physically at a later date, there will always be some claims that remain open because they require the office to further correspond or wait for correspondence or deposits from the applicant. These claims, presently hovering about 90,000, do not contribute to the backlog, but they are in fact an anticipated and routine part of the office's business operations, at least as planned. The office is also obviously aware of the need for quality assurance, and while we're very mindfully exploring ways to improve the speed and efficiency of registration, We are mindful of our obligation to ensure the integrity of the registration records that we create and maintain. Fast processing is a goal, but it cannot come at the expense of the accuracy and completeness of the public records. This standard affects our ability to develop policies and practices for new kinds of authorship, including works that are born digital and digital ephemera. The public wants to register not only groups of digital photographs, for example, but databases, websites, and blogs. The office needs to catch up, and wants to. What else is the office doing to enhance its services? Well, we're making progress in our efforts to digitize the millions of disparate pre-1978 copyright materials and records, many of which represent works still protected by copyright law. And I think, as you know, records for post-78 claims are online. This project is of utmost historical importance as there is no complete backup of such records for preservation or security purposes. It is also of critical importance to our mission as an Office of Public Record, making it easier for people to locate copyright owners, analyze copyright term, analyze historic records, and facilitate licensing. The records are static, of course, but they include registration information, assignments of copyrights, licensing documentation, and other information going back to the beginning of the Copyright Office. Also, as many of you know, the office operates a licensing division, which collects and invests hundreds of millions of dollars in royalties from cable and satellite companies that are subject to statutory licenses. Last year, we distributed more than $240 million to copyright owners, and the licensing division is currently being re-engineered to ensure greater efficiency and to get some of the statements of account online. Licensing is one of our cost recovery operations. And in general, funding for the office, which I think you know, derives from two sources, from user fees and from appropriations. Over 60% of the office's budget is collected from fees paid for copyright registration, document recordation, and related services. The remaining operating budget covers the policy, legal, adjudicatory, and support operations. To ensure that fees represent current cost and market conditions, the office undertakes a triennial fee study and have one planned for fiscal year 12. The office's FY11 budget was approximately budget request, I should say, was approximately $55.5 million, approximately $34 million of which was funded by office revenues. These are not necessarily easy times to work in the federal government. Ask anyone who works at the Copyright Office, however, why they do so, and they will tell you about the books, films, music, software, art, and photography that make them happy and which mark our progress as a great nation. Technology creates all kinds of new ways in which the office can document creative expression, contribute to policy discussions, and otherwise serve the public, whether the public is publishing, linking, tweeting, or blogging. And that brings me to policy. The Copyright Office has been a central voice in policy discussions for many decades, able because of our perch in the legislative branch and the Library of Congress to consider the non-commercial aspects of the law and to approach copyright from the perspective of individual authors, from libraries and other users, in addition to the very significant contributions of corporate America. The policy duties of the office are set forth in several provisions of the law. The Register conducts rulemakings, advises Congress, including through studies, roundtables, and legislative testimony, and is authorized to provide assistance and information to the judiciary and executive branch agencies. These roles are sometimes a balancing act, and the small group of lawyers on staff work tirelessly on assignments that are complex, sometimes unprecedented, always time-sensitive. And trust me when I tell you that they don't do it for the money, and they take pride in the expert and impartial nature of the office's mission. The Register of Copyrights historically has been the most visible and most utilized public official in the country, and in the humble view of the Copyright Office, this has served the nation well. Copyright stakeholders today do not disagree. In recent months, the library's chief of staff and I held 45 meetings with more than 75 people who wanted to discuss with the librarian the appointment of the next register. Consider the letter to Dr. Billington from the American Intellectual Property Law Association, for example. The Copyright Office should be managed and directed by an individual having the highest qualifications, in-depth knowledge of U.S. copyright law and international obligations of the United States under copyright treaties, high intellect, legal skills, professional and personal integrity, sound judgment, and extensive experience in other relevant areas of law. In general, the issues most mentioned by the most stakeholders or substantive experience and expertise, a diplomatic and judicious temperament, real management experience, and a track record of success in managing people and projects, experience with the copyright marketplace, how is copyright implemented, for example, and a curiosity and demonstrated interest in technology. There was some variety, as you might expect, in the terms of the order in which these skills were ranked. Why such high standards for a job that began in the bowels of the library in an era of books, maps, and charts, and piano rolls? Because everybody wants good policy that is, if not free of politics, at least inclusive and responsibly reasoned. So how does the Copyright Office move forward? I'd say, first, real dialogue with the copyright community, broadly defined. It's not a conversation if we are only talking with people that we already agree with. It's not progress if we aren't looking for points of consensus and moving forward. This is the goal of the office, but certainly it can always do better. Leadership. The goals of the Copyright Office are to get to the best answer as a matter of law and policy. Sometimes this will mean doing what we think is right, based on our jobs as civil servants, in the process perhaps making people everywhere unhappy. We're pretty good on this last point. Collaboration. Everyone deserves a Copyright Office that collaborates with other agencies, draws on mutual resources, and works towards consensus. Outreach. Trainings, education, social media. How do people use our information and our services? What do people need? What is our future role as an Office of Public Record? And stewardship. How do we partner with the private sector and maintain control of the uniquely governmental roles? What roles are entrusted to and belong in the federal government? How can we sustain a talented and motivated staff that enjoys innovation and is able to adapt the office to new media and new forms of authorship? How do we perform our responsibilities to Congress, to the Library of Congress, and to the public? Thank you very much for your time, and I very much look forward to our discussion this afternoon.